So, John chapter 1. Let's read from verse 1 through verse 9. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being, in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. So who is this Word? This Word is Jesus, right? The Son of God. Verse 6. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light. The true light which enlightens everyone was coming into the world. Let's read that again. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. So today we're going to focus on verses 6 through 9 in John chapter 1. I don't have any fancy title for this sermon, so even on my computer, I just labeled it John 1 Part 2. Some scholars believe that John chapter 1, verse 6 through 9 were added on later after John finished writing this gospel in order to make the gospel of John flow more nicely. If you look at the gospel in the Greek text, it's one of the most sophisticated New Testament books. It's written in a very high level of Greek. John must have been really educated. And then not only is it using a very sophisticated language, but it puts Jesus up on center stage. Jesus is at the forefront. Jesus is the center of this gospel. Him as a Messiah, him as the Son of God. That is what John is portraying. Other gospels seem to really make Jesus seem human. Matthew emphasizes Jesus being the son of David. Mark begins his gospel with the baptism of Jesus. Luke emphasizes the Immaculate Conception, how Mary really is the mother of Jesus, our Messiah. However, John's gospel is different. At the beginning of this gospel, as I shared with you last month, John begins by proclaiming Jesus' existence in the beginning. In the beginning of the world, in the beginning of the universe, in the beginning of time, maybe even before the beginning. In the beginning, John said Jesus was. He was and he is the Word of God. The very Logos. Jesus is God. The Gospel of John wants its readers to know that Jesus is the divine. He is the one that we've been waiting for. He is the Son of God, come to save the world. He is the Messiah and so much more. Not just a human Messiah, not just an earthly king, but he is more than that. He is not only the anointed one, but he is also in the same substance as Yahweh. But here in verse 6, this beautiful poem of the Word of the Son of God, everything changes here. All of a sudden, the gospel shifts, doesn't it? No longer is the gospel focused on the Word or on Jesus, But now the gospel focuses on John. In the middle of this beautiful poem about God and the world and Jesus, there's an insertion. It almost sounds like it doesn't fit in. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. There was a man named John. Yeah. John, I think that we're still on Jesus, or we should be, right? But John doesn't care. It's someone else's turn now. For the next 3 verses, he forces us to switch gears and focus our attention to John. It's a mini biography of sorts, kind of like the ones that you see at the end of a book, in the book jacket. But John the Baptist wasn't the author of John, so John the Baptist wasn't narcissistic enough to write about himself and to stick his name in between this beautiful poem of the Son of God. So why is it that John the Baptist's name and life was sandwiched in to the poetic descriptions of Jesus? Because you see, if you continue reading later, it continues saying, he was in the world and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. Again, beautiful poetry about Jesus. So it's strange that for those verses 6 through 9, John the Baptist was inserted there. Why is that? I'm not too sure. I don't know John. But maybe it's because the story of Jesus does not only involve him. Jesus' life story is not only about Jesus. Does that make sense? The life and ministry of Jesus is not only about Jesus, but it's about all of his followers. The life and ministry of Jesus is about all of us, involves all of us. So there was a man whose name was John, and it says that he was sent from God. He was sent. Now, if I remember correctly from my days in seminary and from my Greek class, the sent one is also known as an apostle. And if I look at my Greek Bible, which I have at home, I can see that the word that is used here to describe John the Baptist was indeed apostle. But we don't know him by Apostle John the Baptist, do we? We call him John the Baptizer or John the Baptist because he baptized Jesus. That's what he was known for. However, if you look closely, John was not only a baptizer. He was sent out. He was sent by God. It says here that John was sent. He was a man sent from God. So now we know that John was an apostle. We know nothing else about him so far. We know that he is sent. He is an apostle. He was sent by God, and then later in the text it states the purpose. He is an apostle because he came as a witness to testify to the light. He came as a witness to testify to the light. That was his purpose. John was an apostle in order to bear witness to the light. In order to bear witness, he bore witness. I don't want to go into all the details of Greek again. I was taught in my preaching class never to talk about Greek words in your sermon. But I think that these words are important. So I'll say this. John came as a martyr to testify to the light. The word for witness in the Greek is martyr. So we see here that John, the son of Zechariah and Elizabeth, is the first official martyr written in the Gospels. To be a martyr doesn't necessarily mean that you have to die for one's faith. Instead, the origins of the word martyr means to bear official evidence. Just like in the court of law, when a testimony is spoken by a witness of the events, giving the jury legal evidence and verifying the truth for the case. So he was giving legal testimony. He was proclaiming to the jury of the world the legal evidence that Jesus is the light. John the Baptist was an apostle, a sent one in order to verify the truth of Jesus' case. John the Baptist was sent into the world to verify that Jesus really is the Son of God, that he really is the Lord. He really is sent from God, and that he really is the Son of God. As Christians,